Welcome back everybody, I'm Theme Park Stevo. Let's get straight into theme park theory. So today I'm taking a deep dive into what is almost certainly the Jurassic World area for Universal Studios UK. I predict that it will take a lot of elements from Beijing, including the name, which is Jurassic World Isla Nublar. But let's have a look at the area as a whole and take it from there. So starting in the bottom left of the area, which will probably be the main entrance, I predict that we're going to see the Jurassic World style gates, complete with burning torches on the side, so pretty much identical to the area in Beijing. Then walking through you can see there's a large building with like the hut style roofs, and I expect this to kind of be like the visitors centre, exactly like the one in Islands of Adventure. And in here I think there's going to be things like shops, possibly like a food and drink outlet, maybe selling popcorn. I think there'll be things like props from the films, dinosaur statues, possibly, again from Islands of Adventure, the hatchery which shows like baby dinosaurs being born and kind of like the signs bit from the first film behind the scenes. These seem to be styled like the original Jurassic Park film, so it does make me wonder if there's going to be a bit of a merge between the modern films and the original films. That way it can kind of be kept up to date but also lean into that nostalgia factor. Then just outside that is this teeny tiny hut, which again I think is probably going to be a food and drink location, or possibly some merchandise on there as well, like the sipper cups and the popcorn buckets. Then following round to the left, to me this looks like it could be kind of like a bit of a kid's corner. It looks like a Camp Jurassic kind of place with slides, playground, elevated walkways, and then in this top corner it looks like a small hut again, and I think this could be like one of those quiet areas that some of the parks have, or if this had have happened 10 years ago, I'd have probably said a smoking area, but I think given the state of things nowadays, I think it's very unlikely. It could be a shelter, or it could even be something like a small outdoor kind of like hidden tiki bar, which could then sell cocktails and mocktails, almost like a bit of a hidden surprise in the jungle. Then below that we have what appears to be two drop towers. And I'm a bit torn on these because I think on one hand they'd be absolutely great as like two small kids drop towers, similar to, I think they're called like the Fire and Ice Birds from Legoland Windsor. Great for kids and young adults, and to be honest, if they're anything like Tikal from Phantasialand, they are so much fun. Like even for adults, I love going on them. They are absolutely great. Actually, if you compare the height comparison to either, I suppose, the supposed Back to the Future coaster spike and the other big green coaster over there, or to be honest, even the big show building, they do appear to be pretty tall. And you start thinking if Back to the Future is going to be like, over 300 feet, that puts these, kind of close to 200 feet potentially, and that's basically the same height as Doctor Doom's Fearfall from Islands of Adventure. So we could get a couple of pretty big drop towers. Either way, I think these could either have like a generic kind of dino drop theming, or they could lean into it a bit more specifically and go for something like the Diplodocus drop and incorporate the actual dinosaur elements into the theming. And moving around you have multiple walkways with rocks and fountains, and I think this is going to be such a lovely place here. I can imagine on like a sunny day, nice and warm, hearing like the Jurassic Park calypso music playing and listening to the water is just going to be absolutely amazing. I think it's also a good opportunity to include like some small hidden details here, kind of like sea fossils and ichthyosaurus skeletons and maybe some like small animatronics like little compass to sort of really bring the place to life. Then obviously the main ride in this land is in this massive building, and it's obviously going to be a dark ride, and I, like everyone else, is 99.9% sure that it's going to be a clone of Jurassic World Adventure from the Beijing park, which would be absolutely spectacular. However, for the 0.1% chance that Universal do go for something different, I kind of had the idea that they could take the basic idea of Jurassic World Adventure, but kind of change it up a bit and have a different experience. So using the same ride type, which is kind of similar to Transformers and Spider-Man, you could board onto like an amphibious boat and go for a scenic nighttime river tour of Jurassic World with like only the vehicle spotlights and the moonlight to light your way. You go past some awe-inspiring scenes of like a herd of Brachiosauruses like with a baby, and think of like gigantic models. I'm thinking like the walkers from Rise of the Resistance. Then something goes wrong, lightning hits and the power goes out just as you happen to approach the T-Rex paddock. Rexy breaks out and you see a giant T-Rex head emerge from the river and lunge at you, trying to eat your boat, kind of paying homage to like the original book and Jurassic World Rebirth. It chases you through the water like the Indominus Rex does from Jurassic World Adventure, and just when you think you've escaped, the Indominus Rex comes around, corners you and moves in for the kill. Rexy appears behind you as the vehicle spins round and they start fighting one another and roaring, and the chase continues, onto like big screens, and you drive up onto land, and then, you buy the visitors centre and you watch them fight until the Mosasaurus leaps out of the water and drags the Indominus back into its tank, and then you manage to escape from danger. I think having that layer of water across the ride would, I'm probably only thinking, like a foot or two deep, just absolutely elevate it to the next level. I've seen a ride not too long ago, just in the last few days, and I think it's called Mission Bermudas from Futuroscope, and that's it's almost like the next evolution of that. So if you haven't seen that video, make sure you go and find it, because it's kind of crazy what they've done with the ride. It's like a roller coaster that goes into the water, and then it's got supports that kind of move the boat around, like really, really clever. I'm thinking take that, but whack on the Spider-Man and Transformers ride, and then, oh my god, it would be absolutely insane, that ride. I think it'd probably go to be like the most technologically advanced dart ride in the world if they did that, and it'd serve as a bit of a precursor to my number one desire in my heart, which is a reimagining of Jaws, like done proper horror style. If you had that kind of ride vehicle for that, you could make it absolutely terrifying. So to calm things down a little bit, we've got this building here, which I think could be a couple of different things, to be honest. I suspect it's probably going to be some form of meet and greet. Most likely kind of a clone of all the other parks, and have a Raptor meet and greet where you can see and meet Blue. You could add in a couple of other variations, like the handler holding the baby dino, and it'd basically be a staple attraction. Or they could do something a little bit different, and I was thinking, what about if it was a themed restaurant? And I'm thinking along the lines of like Space 220 in Epcot. So by that I mean, there's the whole theatre of going into the restaurant. It's not just you walk through a door and you're in, there's like a journey into it. There's giant screens around which look like windows, and each section of the restaurant could show a different enclosure which then like rotates and changes. It appeared to be looking out, into different paddocks, and you could see raptors, T-Rex, Brachiosaurus, Ankylosaurus, and every so often one of them comes up to a window to kind of see what you're doing. And then almost taking it the next step further, you have, cameras, and they see what you're doing, and it uses AI to interact with the guests. So like by imitating them, or, having a jump scare at you if you get too close. You can even have an underwater window which shows off the Mosasaurus swimming around and splashing and, eating the giant shark. And of course, you'd need a good sized bar section at one end to kind of cater for me and the other drinkers out there. I think if they put a lot of effort into this and did it well, I think it'd easily be the busiest restaurant in the park, and it'd set it as an absolute must do. Now, for this building here, the concept art, at least I don't think so. I don't think it's clear enough to kind of categorically to say this belongs to the big green coaster. It could be the queue building for it, or it could be something else entirely. I think if we have a bit of fun with it and assume that it's something different entirely, and this building at the back here is actually the queue for the green coaster, then we actually get another attraction at Isla Nublar. And I'd absolutely love to see this as like a display kind of show. So think of people being sat around and kind of like an elevated stage in like an amphitheatre style. It'd be kind of like a dinosaur presentation, which could be hosted by Dr. Wu on a big screen, and then, a couple of helpers on the stage. Handlers bring out kind of bigger and bigger dinosaurs, starting with some of the smaller ones like compies, they move on to raptors. And I can imagine like the really small ones might be like puppets. The bigger ones might be like the Boston Dynamics robots like they're using for the dragons in Epic Universe. And they get bigger and bigger, and then they kind of become these giant puppets where there's multiple people controlling them, a bit like the Walking with Dinosaurs kind of stage show. Maybe even have a flying dinosaur using like a similar setup to Toothless from the How to Train Your Dragon show in Epic Universe. And for the grand finale, the floor of the stage opens up to reveal a water tank with a shadow swimming round. A shark gets lowered from the ceiling, and a giant animatronic Mosasaurus head comes up out of the water, snatches the shark in its jaws, and takes it back down and the water turns red. I'd love to have the floor shake or drop during this bit to kind of give that extra emphasis on the supposed size of that. Now this building here does seem a little bit odd, as it doesn't quite fit the styling of the others, and so this might not actually be part of Isla Nublar. But if it is, I could see it being like a bit of an indoor, I suppose, activity centre almost. Like, think of it having something like a fast food court and a couple of shops, some props and statues in there, maybe like an arcade. I'd like to see like a bit like a carousel in there. I'm thinking like the Constellation Carousel from Epic Universe. So rather than it just being a traditional one, with bits that go around in a circle, kind of does that almost like the teacup pattern as you go around. Have an amazing stylized, cartoony dinosaurs on there for people to ride on. So you have Brachiosaurus, you have Triceratops, you have Stegosaurus, all these different dinosaurs done in like a very animated kind of style. Suitable for everyone and like set right in the middle of the building with everything around it. I think this would be brilliant, like particularly because there's a lot of space in there that people could go into and get refuge from the fantastic British weather that we have all year round. I think it'd just be a nice way to kind of show off that same ride style, but in a very different way to what they've done at Epic Universe. Now this green coaster here, I had been thinking that it would likely be something not Jurassic World related, and it, kind of flow into a slightly different land. But I think having debated with myself about 10 million times, I do reckon that this is probably going to be one massive Jurassic World land. So this is almost certainly going to be a Jurassic World coaster. I think the most likely suspect is going to be a clone of the Flying Dinosaur coaster from Japan. And that's great, but it's a bit safe and a bit boring for me. So personally, I'd like to see something more akin to my #1 coaster in the world, which is Velocicoaster. Albeit with a different skin. Obviously a different track layout, but instead of it being Velocicoaster with the theme being Velociraptors, I'd love it to be T-Rex themed. And I've said in a previous video, like, my name for this would be TyrannoCoaster. Get an LSM launch coaster that would rival Velocicoaster and Taran for speed and thrills. Have some T-Rexes sprinkled throughout the ride, maybe like a baby T-Rex. Some big jaws coming out to give some scary new misses, along with that T-Rex roar to pump up the intensity. However, I have got to admit that it does look a lot more like a flying coaster than a traditional one, hence the Flying Dinosaur coaster. So a slightly alternative idea would be theme it after the Quetzalcoatlus, which does happen to be in multiple Jurassic World films. I think it was in Dominion and in Rebirth. And so you call it the Quetzal Coaster. So this is like a monster flying dino, and the ride would reflect that. The train would be styled after the dino, and it would soar and swoop through the land, even going through like the big helix just feet above the lagoon surface. If they made this ride really intense, it could be the star coaster of the park. So in terms of looking at the concept art, that's kind of it for the attractions and buildings. However, I've also been thinking a lot about the possible food and drink options for the land as well. I just think Universal are going to do some really cool stuff and really pull it out of the bag for this. I think they're going to put all the other UK parks' food offerings to absolute shame. Merlin. Aramac. And I've had a good think about what kind of food I'd like to see in this land, and I've come up with some really safe options. I think they do seem a little bit boring, but having tasted Universal food and comparing it to the likes of things at Alton Towers, sometimes the simple things are really, really good. For a lot of the the quick service things, I think they have standard meals. I thought of the T-Rex meal, which is a standard quarter-pounder burger. The Brachiosaurus meal, which would be a half-pound buffalo burger, make it big and meaty, just like the dinosaur. The Mosasaurus meal, basically a fillet of fish. The Triceratops, which is a plant-based burger, because Triceratops is a vegetarian. Get it? Yeah, not funny, but there it is. The Compy Bucket, which is just chicken wings. The Jurassic World salad, which would kind of be like a big Cobb salad. I love the American salads. I hope they bring more over here. They're fantastic. And then for the kids, you have the Raptor Burger Kids Meal, which is obviously just like a smaller burger meal for kids. And then the Raptor Strips Kids Meal, which is chicken strips for kids, or if you happen to be a fussy eater. I'd like to see all the meals come with fries, drink and a choice of dessert really. I'm thinking either something like a pineapple panna cotta maybe to go with like the tropical theme, or just a straightforward chocolate pudding. Who doesn't like that? And then as I was talking about the restaurant earlier, I did mention a bar. So I've kind of gone and kind of like invented 10 dino-themed drinks that I'd love to see. And these would be available either in like the Jurassic Tiki Bar or in the bar section of the Jurassic World restaurant. So my number one is a Raptorita, which is like my absolute favourite. It'd be like my twist on a classic margarita. Use jalapeno infused tequila, a splash of blue curacao to match Blue the Velociraptor, lime wedge garnish, served on the rocks with a chili salt rim. Fantastic. There's an Isla Nublar Negroni, which is kind of a nice twist on a Negroni with aged rum instead of gin. Have flaming orange peel to kind of mimic the volcanic eruption. And then I've got a T-Rex tonic, which is pretty much just a gin and tonic with, you know, some fancy gin with a big prehistoric leaf in it to kind of give it that Jurassic Parkness to it. Jurassic Jungle Bird, which is variant of a jungle bird, but I thought why not chuck in some absinthe for it, and served in a tiki glass. Why not? It's a tiki bar, you've got to have something in that. A Bronto Bourbon Smash, big and bold, just like a Brontosaurus. Then we've got the Indominus Mule, basically my take on a Moscow Mule using ghost pepper, vodka, ginger beer and lime juice. I think it'd be really fiery, that. Served in a souvenir mug. So this one was one of my favourites actually, even though I hate whiskey with a passion. An amber old fashioned, so try and make it like really smoky and honey-ish. Basically you get a souvenir mosquito trapped in amber with the drink. A Fossil Fuel, which is basically an espresso martini. Can't go wrong with that really. Then we've got a Mosasaur Mai Tai. Make it kind of blue with the blue curacao and dark rum, and you know it's got a pineapple fin in it. Looks great. My last one was a Cryo Cosmo, which is basically a smoky cosmopolitan using dry ice for that fog to come over. In case you haven't figured out, I am really into my cocktails, with my particular weakness being a margarita, so fingers crossed for Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville. To be honest, I'm just praying that Universal go all out on the cocktails, as well as having plenty of, you know, mocktails, non-alcoholic versions, along with maybe a couple of beers which you can only get in the park, sort of, you know, really limited. And that, my friends, is the end of our prehistoric journey through what might just become the crown jewel of Universal Studios UK. From intense coasters and mind-blowing dark rides to cinematic storytelling and immersive environments, this Jurassic World land is certainly going to be absolutely ferocious. So, whether you're braving a raptor encounter, spinning with baby dinos, or just sipping a Raptorita under the amber glow of Isla Nublar, one thing's for sure.
Life finds a way.
If you enjoyed this deep dive, give it a like, share it with a fellow theme park nerd, and hit the subscribe button for more content just like this. And let me know in the comments, what are you most excited to see in Jurassic World in the UK park? In my next video, I'm going to be diving into this area of the park and basically taking a look at what Back to the Future might look like when the park opens, or what else it could be as well. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time.